John teaches Sean about his brain. The podcast where I, Sean, embark on a journey to understand what's happening in my own head. Spoiler alert, I have no clue, but that's precisely why we're here. In each episode, I explore questions about the brain that I believe will resonate with all of us. Like, why can't I turn my brain off at 3 a.m.? Why my memory only works when it feels like it? And why my brain seems to betray me when I need it most. Listen, I'm not a scientist. I'm no expert. I'm just a guy looking to unravel the mysteries of my own mind. Fortunately, I happen to know a cognitive neuroscientist who is an expert in the brain, and I get to ask him all the questions I want. So, if you're curious, confused, or simply along for the ride, welcome. And hey, if you like what you hear, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to the podcast, or whatever it is you do wherever you listen to podcasts. I don't know how the algorithms work. I just know that your support keeps this journey moving forward. And together, we might just discover something remarkable. This is John teaches Sean about his brain. Let's get started. Hi, John. It's good to see you.
Hey, Sean. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. But I'm more curious, what's on your mind this week?
Well, this last week, I watched a movie on Netflix. It's called Will and Harper. Have you heard of it?
I have heard of it. Yes, I have not seen it yet.
Okay.
I haven't. I know what it is, though.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about it briefly.
Okay.
And for those who haven't heard about it or seen it, I'll just give you a quick synopsis. This will be even a condensed version from a trailer, so I'm not going to give away any secrets.
Okay.
But just from the trailer, it's about the actor Will Ferrell and his friend Harper Steele. And when Will Ferrell first joined Saturday Night Live, Harper was one of the writers, and I think the lead writer for the comedy series.
Yep.
And she also wrote in some of the movies that Will Ferrell was in and those types of things. But she was a writer at that time as a male. She transitioned to a female. And so this movie is about her telling Will Ferrell and then them taking a trip across the U.S. together, like a road trip. So it's really fascinating and interesting. And it brings up a lot of points and a lot of questions, but it's clear that there's a lot of misunderstanding around transgender people. And as I was watching it, I was just thinking, why is there so much misunderstanding? And I mean, if you listen to and watch people's responses, like politicians and others, they'll tell you why they don't like transgender people. They'll say they're dangerous and they're evil. I mean, it's words that they use, but I don't believe that that's just I don't believe that's the full story. Because if you say transgender people are dangerous and they're evil, then either every transgender person in the U.S. and you're basing it on the fact that I know every one of these individuals and they are dangerous and they are evil, or and that's not possible. We know that you can't know every transgender person, or you're stereotyping them, and we shouldn't stereotype people. We can stereotype foods, buildings, objects, animals, but you shouldn't stereotype people. And so what is it then? Then why would they say these things? And so I wanted to talk about that for just a bit. And I wanted to stay away from the morality and political arguments, because those are everywhere around transgender people. And I wanted to talk about the brain and what's happening in the brain. And if for those that have been listening to this podcast for a while, you may already be able to guess some of the reasons, but I just wanted to point out a couple things. One thing is that our brain is wired to sort and categorize things. And I know we've talked about this, but it it helps us to be able to do that. Like, I hate cucumbers. And before you ask, yes, I love pickles, especially dill, spicy, hot pickles. I tried horseradish pickles once. They were unbelievable. Uh, but when I say I hate cucumbers, everybody always says, do you like pickles? Yes, I love pickles. I hate cucumbers. And so when I see something that looks like a cucumber, I just immediately sort it and categorize it. That's awful. I don't want any of that, which is difficult because I love zucchini squash, and those look so similar that it's like I've learned now to be able to see the difference between them. So if I'm being served something, I can tell by the skin whether it's a cucumber or a
Oh,
squash, which I used to
wow.
not be able to do that. But
Okay.
sorting and categorizing is good. It's what our brain does. It helps us get through life easier. Our brain is also wired to fear the unknown. So one of our brain principles is the brain always presumes danger. If we're not sure about something, it helps survival wise if you just say, I'm not going to touch, I'm not going to deal with that or touch it because I don't know what it is. Like, that berry on that branch looks really good and luscious and big and juicy, but I'm afraid of that. I'm staying away from that thing. So that's good. And then our brain is wired to, uh, I don't know, let's see, agree, maybe not agree with authority, believe authority. Like, if somebody in an authoritative position says something, we tend to give it credit and merit
Hmm.
just because the person in authority said it. Or if the majority is doing something, we tend to jump in with the majority, like the mob mentality type thing. And those have all been studied a lot. And I think those all contribute to why people are afraid of transgender people. Our brain is wired to sort and categorize them. They're the others. They're an other, and I don't understand other. And so I fear the unknown, and then I'm going to agree with authority and the majority on this. And so that, I think that plays a big role in why some people are afraid, and so that's understandable. Um, I can understand why a person who feels like they're the same gender as the sex they were born with, why they would say, "Man, I don't really understand people who are different in that way, who think that they're a different person than the sex they were born in. And I don't really, I kind of fear them and I distrust them." I understand why that's possible, but, and that's because that's what our back channel is wired to do. It's wired to do those things. But we also have an on channel. And remember, the back channel is the non conscious brain. The on
Hmm.
channel is our conscious awareness. So we also have conscious awareness. We have an on channel. And one of the jobs of the on channel is to monitor the back channel. So we should do more of that. And I'm I'm not preaching right now at anybody because I still struggle with this. And I for years I've been trying to get better at understanding the thoughts and urges that are kind of bubbling up from the back channel, and understand why I'm having those and what they mean. And I feel like I've gotten more sensitive to those so I can pick them up quicker and understand them better. But it's a skill you have to learn and develop. And I think we should all try to love and try to learn and develop that skill. And instead of judging, try to love our fellow humans and practice tolerance. And I said I'm not preaching, but I am going to say that from Scripture that the first book of John says that there's no fear in love, and in fact, it goes on to say perfect love drives out fear, chases away fear. So there's no reason to fear transgender people from that point of view. And I don't know. Do you know any transgender people personally?
I do.
You
I do.
do?
And as I was listening to you talk, I was thinking about in previous episodes when we talked about stereotyping people, and it's probably easier, but it ties into this is if there is a stereotype or a prejudice against, we were talking about racism,
Mm-hmm.
and saying, that, let's say, all black people are this, all Hispanic people are this, these stereotypes that are so dangerous. But I think that there's stories out there, and I think that, and it's not even, I think my belief is if you got to know the people you're talking about, it would completely shatter this back channel stereotype, this labeling, and all of that. It's easier for me because I have friends. They have a non-binary child, and that child has changed their name, and is no longer does no longer identifies as the gender that they were born. And again, I have witnessed from the inside, family members, close friends, um, uh, use the wrong name, a wrong pronoun, and I can't speak to the fact that they were doing it intentionally, but I think they were. And it's just like,
Making a point.
yeah, I'm going to make a point
Mhm.
of I don't believe in this thing, and I'm not saying me. Again,
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
speaking for the people that I've seen this happen to. Now, some people do it, and it's an honest mistake.
Yep.
They're like, oh, because their back channel is like, it's this gender, and I say that gender, and it's a mistake. That happens too. But my whole point to that is I believe that knowing this person, I keep saying child, they're not even a child anymore, but knowing this person has been a huge benefit for me because I understand this a little bit better.
Are they
I
dangerous?
no,
Okay.
not like
Are
the
they evil?
farthest thing from it.
Yeah. Okay.
But again, it's like, why don't you, instead of just hiding behind a keyboard or a lectern and saying all of these dangerous things, or
Hmm.
that these people are this thing, which
Hmm.
is that we're back to stereotyping people again, which I know I fight this all the time. The brain does this.
Yeah.
But to your point, the on channel has this amazing ability to monitor those
Yep.
thoughts, behaviors, actions. And so again, getting to know a transgender person and going, oh, that's what this is. Like, this is. But the last thing I'll say, and this is just a really interesting topic for me, because I want to get to know what's going on in these people's brain as well. I don't just want to, I don't want to say that the people who are saying that transgender people are dangerous or they're these things or bad or whatever. I don't want to label those people too. I want to understand, and I believe that, and that's there's a question here, is as far as categorizing isn't it much easier just to go, no, there's only two genders, there's male and female, the way you're born, and for my brain that's easier. I can go,
Mhm.
you're a female and it means all of these things, you're a male and it means all these things, and that's just easier.
Yeah.
And I don't want to complicate things by learning new genders and using pronouns, because using pronouns is hard. I don't want to do that. And again, I'm being a little facetious. I don't want to be disrespectful to the people who we're talking about either, because they have the capacity to grow and learn if they want to.
Hmm.
We've talked about how the brain works, how you can rewire it. All of this is possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we just have to get, I don't know that anyone who would make that statement that trans people are dangerous are listening to this podcast.
No, probably not.
I doubt it, but if they are, it just
But
takes a little bit of effort to rewire your brain. It's not that hard.
yeah, but I think people listening to this, if you don't know a transgender person, you might have those feelings of, I don't know, I'm kind of afraid. I mean, they might be dangerous type thing. So you might have those feelings even if you're not stating it. So
Yeah.
so you're right, because that's normal. As I just said, that's what the brain's wired to do. If something's other than or different from, then the brain automatically fears that new
Yeah.
novel thing. But when you said, there's only two sexes, male and female, and
Right.
it is determined by our chromosomes, I just want to say to people then, and that's the end of it. Like, there's no nuance beyond that. It's like, it's
Right.
this way and that's it. I want to say, if that's true, if we are just determined by the XX and XY, then we are all the same. I mean, so there's no nuances in individuals. So now we're what, 2 billion clones with XX and 2 billion clones with XY. I mean, we would all have the same wants, same likes, everything would be the same, but it's not just XX and XY. There's nuances within that. genes that are expressed and some that aren't. There's some that are passed on and some that aren't. And all of these different things help determine just our biology, let alone our experiences and things like that. It's like saying that 1 + 1 = 2 is what math is. And the answer is, yeah, that's math, but so is fractal geometry that describes snowflakes and fingerprints and the circuitry in our body. That's math too. And so is chaos theory that took all these extremely complicated equations to come up with the butterfly effect. That's math too. So math isn't just 1 + 1 = 2. And if you think that male and female is the end of all of it, then it just shows that you don't have an understanding of the nuances beyond that. And with some effort, you can understand and learn some more. And I would encourage people to do that. But you also said you're wanting to learn about the brains of the transgender people, kind of what they're thinking. So this is a little bit different take on that, but I wanted to touch on that too, to say, let's look at the other side of this. Why would anybody put themselves through the mental and social pain of transitioning to another gender in our current culture? Because so let's think about the brain. We've talked about survival stress, right? Threat of harm and threat of life. Transitioning is dangerous. So the threat of harm can be physical harm, it can be mental harm, it can be emotional harm. All of those are relevant in this topic. Also, so the brain has to overcome those fears, which the brain tries to avoid that. So it has to overcome those fears to say, I want to transition into who I feel like I really am. Also, the brain it does everything it can to fit in and adapt to its surroundings. And this is the opposite of fitting in and adapting. Right. So imagine what's compelling somebody to overcome those kind of drives that are instinctual in the brain to transition. And then I've also heard people say that, oh, they're just doing it for attention. These people just want attention. And I'm thinking about if you follow that logic out and say, okay, what would you have to do to get attention? Somebody like me, who I identify my gender with the sex I was born with. So I was born a male and I identify as a male. Do you know how difficult it would be for me to choose to try to be a female and to say, I'm going to start dressing as a female and going out in public. I'm going to start acting like a female. I'm going to go have some surgeries to become a female because I want attention. Like, you know how many other things I could do to get attention? They're so much easier. I could start.
Yeah, it's easy.
It's so much easier than.
I don't want to trample on your point though, because that's a really good point you just made. Is for anyone who would say that this person is just seeking attention. I want to go back to your point. There are many different ways you could get attention other than what you just laid out.
Yeah.
And I want to just go back. We're already this is a really good topic. And so I don't want to bog it down, but you brought something up about how do you, when someone's born, that's a rhetorical question I'm about to ask, but when someone's born, how do we decide what gender they are? Because you brought up two things: the genitalia that they're born with.
That's their sex,
right? But
biological sex, yes.
But do you know, and this is again rhetorical, and I would ask anybody who's interested to look this figure up, because you brought up math, how many births there are in the world that they have, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. You might know the name of it, but they have mismatched sex organs, meaning they have a penis and a uterus. They have any combination of that. There's actually, the number's not staggering, but there are children who are born with, and I'm trying to remember the actual
intersex, I think, is the correct term. It used to be, there used to be another term that's been changed. Yeah.
Okay. But again, it's up to the doctor and that moment to just decide based on the anatomy what this person is. So there's
Yeah.
one. If you
Uh-huh.
believe that it's based on the sex organs, that's one.
Mhm.
If you believe it's based on your chromosome, XY, XX, those things,
Mhm.
I would ask again, if you're interested, look up how many children are born in the world with more than two chromosomes.
Mhm.
There's up to, I've seen up to five. Now that's rare, but how many children are born with three, XYX or any of those combinations?
Mhm.
And so again, just trying to maybe get this conversation started about, it's not as easy as our brain tries to make it. 1+1+2=3. I like that.
Mhm.
Sean likes that because it's really easy. But in actuality, all the other math that you brought up, it seems like those are. So again, if we're going back to the people who, especially politicians, elected officials, or just people ranting about transgender people, and or non-binary, all of the people who don't look and act like you expect them to, like you do, like the
Mhm.
people so you can educate yourself on these topics. You can just, again, get to know some of the people that we're talking about right now, because when you get to know them, my belief is, minus very, very few exceptions, they're just human beings. They have most of the same problems that we do. And that goes for race,
Mhm.
gender. You can say it's a human experience. So people who are
Yeah.
different than you, when you get to know them, you find out we're not all that different.
Yeah, that's true. And it's interesting when you were talking about intersex individuals who are born with both genitalia, and the doctor and parents decide which that person's going to be.
Yeah.
It's almost always female. I believe that's right, because that's an easier surgery. It's whichever surgery is easier.
Oh
And
boy,
so
you just
maybe they're
added
almost
another layer. Okay.
always male, which is the
Mhm.
easier surgery. I can't
Right.
remember. They're generally one or the other. And then if you say that later in life, that person, like let's say that the doctor and parents decided this was going to be a male child,
Hmm.
that later they felt like a female. When I've talked to people, they've said, well, that's understandable, but it was unfortunate of how they were born. So that's a special case. And I'm thinking, but their brain identified one way and felt like this is the group I fit in with. So how can you allow that for some people and not other people?
Yeah.
And fortunately for most, and I'm saying fortunately just only because of our society, most of us identify with the gender we were born with. So it
Yeah.
makes it easy for us.
Yeah.
But that, if you're going to make an exception for some people, then why do you not make it for other people, I guess? So
What a
so
great
really I
question.
think I think what I'm asking, so you haven't seen it yet.
Not
If
yet.
any of our listeners have not seen Will and Harper, I'm asking you to watch the movie, but I want to suggest some guidelines when you watch it.
Okay.
So this is a this is a suggestion. I hope you do this, but obviously you don't have to. I won't be there to oversee you doing this. But I want you to watch it with the intention of gaining a better understanding of how the brain works, and thinking about it from that point of view. If you watch it wondering why a transgender person thinks the way they do, or why they do the things they do or make the choices they make, then you're probably not going to understand it as well or get as much out of it. In fact, when you can't wrap your mind around something, your brain automatically jumps to the sorting into us versus them type categories, and
Oh.
then fear starts to creep in. So instead, I really hope that you all view each character as an individual human, not part of an out group, and then think about why their brain is doing what they're doing. Because there's more than just Harper that shows up in the movie. But
Oh.
try to think
Okay.
of it in that way, and try to pick up bits of conversations and overt behaviors that offer clues as to why their brains are pushing them this way to help them survive and thrive, even though it seems like what they're doing is going against what the brain does. Then what is it that's compelling them to do that. 'Cause Harper's so brave, and some of the other people in there, and I'm just thinking, I don't think I could be that brave. I don't think my brain can muster the courage that they show, which is true for a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people that feel trapped in the wrong sexed body, but they're too afraid to say anything about it. So we see some transgender people, but I know that there's a lot more out there than what we see. So I'm super interested to hear if you watch it that way, Sean, or if any of our listeners watch it kind of from that perspective. If you have some insight into it, I would love to hear that. I'd be super excited to hear that. So maybe message the show on social media or something
I
if
was
you
just going
watch
to
it and you
say,
have some insights.
if you're listening to this podcast and you're not following us on Blue Sky, I would recommend, if you have a Blue Sky account, follow us there. I would love to see some comments specifically about Will and Harper and what John just said.
And Twitter as well, right?
And Twitter, yeah.
Yeah.
I need to be better about X, getting on there.
X. Sorry,
but yeah, whatever. It's anyway. It's interesting that you're saying that. So I want to just switch gears for a second, but not too far off what you just said. Is when I presented the idea of doing a podcast to you, part of my presentation was a format that I still believe in. The format is, I want to ask you about what's going on in your life. What are you thinking? What are you reading? What's going on with you? Because I'm really interested in that. And then after that, I usually tell you a story about what happened to me and why, and you explain to me how my brain works. We've gone away from that in a few episodes just because the content that we've had has been so rich. But then at the end of the episode, I try to save 10 minutes or so for listener questions, for a brain myth, just something kind of at the end. So that's the format. I ask you what's on your mind. We talk about the brain, and then the last 10 minutes, a question from, like I said, a listener or a brain myth debunked. I'm saying all of that to say, for this one episode, I still want to keep that format, but for this one episode, I'm going to ask that we change that format because on Blue Sky, since you brought it up, we had a listener, someone who follows us on Blue Sky, ask a question. And I want to read you that question because I don't think you can answer this question in 10 minutes. I think that we do need, and we'll see. I think that when you hear this question, you'll know we're going to have to spend a significant amount of time on this. So if you bear with me. So I have Mr. Slaughter on Blue Sky had a question. And here, I'm going to just read it to you as it's written. Question for John. Why are we wired to tell ourselves and each other stories? It seems the most unique aspect of what it is to be human, but from a neurological perspective, why do we do it? Is it simply because it's an easy and processing efficient way to learn, or is there more to it than that?
I can answer that real quick. Yes, yes, maybe, and yes. No, I'm kidding. Could be answered fairly quickly, but this question really digs into a lot of maybe I should say it digs in a little bit to my philosophy on the brain, because I talk about science a lot, but there's also, the interpretation of science and kind of the which becomes your philosophy behind it. And the narrative part is I think a big part of understanding that helps you understand the brain, how it works, why it works, and also helps you interpret your brain and behavior, your thoughts and behavior even better. So I think this is one of those topics that could be foundational that we should spend time on, and kind of go through it.
Yeah.
So let's do that. Let's spend, and not that every question is going to garner its own episode, but like some might and some might not.
Yeah. Yeah. Like some I said, this is a special, this is a kind of a special episode because this question is so good. It's just, you can't answer it in 10 minutes.
Yeah. No,
my opinion.
That's true. I agree with that.
So let's get into narrative then.
Okay.
Just tell me a little bit more about what do narrative. What does
Okay.
that part mean?
Let's start with kind of the big picture of it then.
Yeah.
So, and I know I've kind of told this story before, but I think it's helpful to retell some things. It helps with our understanding. It's the story of how we create images of our world and how we process that. So there's all this physical energy in the environment around us, like light, sound. There's pressure. There's waves of energy, and that energy strikes our sensory systems in different ways. So like light hits our eyes, our ears pick up sound waves, our skin picks up pressure and temperature. So all of our sensory systems have their own ways of gathering information from the environment. But once that energy impinges on those sensory systems, then it's converted through the process of transduction from physical energy into neural energy. And then that neural energy travels through our brain and builds the image that we perceive. You can think of it kind of as little small assembly lines in the brain. So there's a visual assembly line that starts putting together little pieces like edges and shapes and color and motion. And there's different parts of the brain that add different parts to that image that you're building, that visual image. And then sound does the same, and taste and smell and feels. All of those do the same until you wind up at the end of the assembly line. About a quarter of a second to a third of a second later, you have this internal image of what the world outside you is like. And it doesn't just stop there. It's like once your eye captures some light to start down the assembly line, it captures more light. And so right behind that's following more pieces on the assembly line and more pieces. So you're creating this isn't the most accurate way to describe it, but it's the best way to understand it. You're creating these snapshots one after another from like just moment to moment. And those get strung out and kind of stitched together to create a storyline over time. And so that's our understanding. That storyline is a big part of who we are and who we become. So the storyline shapes us to a large degree, and out of that storyline emerges our selfhood of who we are as individuals. So that in a sense, that storyline defines us and describes us and kind of points us in the direction that we're going to go. But that's just the beginning. There's much more to it than the storyline. As I mentioned, the on-channel is conscious awareness. So our on-channel narrates that storyline as it goes. It's like having a master storyteller in our head that's telling us what's happening and how we should experience it, how we should feel about it, and what we should do about it. And that's really consciousness. That's the basis of our narrative. And then our brain, and I'm talking on channel and back channel here, places each of us at the center of our storyline. So we're cast as the main character, obviously. I mean, it would be weird if there was a different main character in your storyline than you. That would be strange. So everything you experience happens around you as the main character. And everything I experience happens around me as the main character in my head. So underlaying all this again is narrative, it's language. And I said a little bit ago that consciousness is the basis for our narrative, but it's a chicken and egg thing because narrative is also the basis of our consciousness. And most theories of human consciousness posit language as they put language there as the key to consciousness. So without language, we couldn't be consciously aware, is what most theories say. Now, some theories are more radical than others and say you can't even experience something unless you have a word for it in language. And then others are much softer and put language with a little bit less importance. But basically all of them, to my knowledge, all the theories of consciousness have language as a key feature. So is that making sense so far? Do you have any comments?
So far, I have more of a question about so this is more philosophy, I guess. Not I guess, but philosophically, the narrative part is what I've kind of grabbed onto. The information that's coming in, you're saying it's gets stitched together and all of that, but at some point, it's just raw data, right? It's just energy, whether
Hmm.
it's neural energy or light, sound, whatever, and it's just energy. At some point, as human beings, we have to give it value, whether good, bad, neutral. Um, my question is I've met some people in the world who just seem to be really negative people. Like the information that they're receiving, and if and this is a oversimplification, but the joke is if they won the lottery, they'd complain about paying the taxes.
Yeah.
Like there's just some people, but then on the flip side, there's some insanely happy people that even when bad things happen, they're like they can find the good in it.
Hmm.
And my question is more: um, is that learned? Is that filter learned, or is that genetic, or is there anything about that assigning value to things?
Yes. So narrative shapes our experiences. So, for example, when these bits of information that our sensory systems absorb or take in and convert into neural energy, as that neural energy is traveling down these assembly lines, they color the product that's being built. And the product is a perception. It's that
Hmm.
picture of the universe. So they can color that. So if we experience something and have negative thoughts about it, then those filters on the assembly lines are adjusted in a way that we're more likely to experience something similar in the future as also being negative. Or if something seems really positive to us, that adjusts those filters again to make it more likely that we'll experience something similar as positive in the future. And the filters I'm talking about are lots of things. There's schemas, they're patterns, they're things that our brain does because again, it's trying to take what it's learning now, or it's trying to take what it's experiencing now to learn from it to better prepare us for something similar to that in the future.
Right.
So let's say that two people are sitting side by side at an NBA basketball game, and one of them, for whatever reasons, their storyline over time has been built to where they really like country music, and the other person sitting right beside them absolutely hates country music. And so now those filters keep getting tweaked and adjusted and tweaked and adjusted. So let's say that they're sitting there and they're getting ready for the national anthem for the start of the game, and a person comes walking out, and the person who hates country music looks at this person that's walking up to the microphone to sing, and they have on cowboy boots and maybe a shirt with tassels with a guitar strung over their shoulder, and they're walking out and they're
Hmm.
thinking, oh no, I hope this isn't a country music singer, because I don't recognize them, let's say. And when the song starts and it's a country music singer and they start to strum and they start to sing the Star Spangled Banner, this person is going, this is so cheesy and this is grating on my nerves so bad. I can't wait till this is over, type of thing. The
Hmm.
person sitting beside them who loves country music is thinking, this is one of the most patriotic things I've ever heard. They might even have a tear streaming down thinking, I've never heard anything quite as beautiful. But it's the same physical energy in the building. It's the same
Hmm.
sights, it's the same sounds. All of that's the same. It's just two brains are taking that information and processing it differently. Whereas if there's a third person sitting there who's never heard country music before, so they must have been visiting from another country or something, but they've never heard it before, they're going to have a completely different experience than the other two that I just gave examples of. So that's why I say narrative helps determine who we become as a person and shapes our selfhood and shapes our likes and dislikes in that way. And I think that was getting at what you were
It
saying, wasn't it?
is.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, you that description of the basketball game, that is exactly what I that is the answer to my question. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Um, there's also an interesting example of this in research that I'll share with you, and this is from uh, an experiment a couple decades ago. So it's been a while back, but the findings still hold true. And there's more around it. I would probably, if I was still reading this area, I would have some more examples. But I just, off the top of my head, I'm thinking about a study where some researchers took a group of people and divided them into two groups. And one group, they asked them like a series of questions, but one of the questions was, can you think of and tell me 3 examples of when you've been helpful to another person? Give me 3 examples and tell me the story behind you being helpful. And then they'd ask them other stories as well. The second group, they said, can you think of and give me examples in story form? Tell me about 12 times that you've helped other people. So it went from 3 times to 12 times. And then after this, they asked them to rate themselves on several different things. And one of the things they rated themselves on was, how helpful are you as a person? And so the idea is, if you thought of more examples, the people with 12 examples will rate themselves as more helpful. Counterintuitively, it turned out to be the opposite way around. Those that had to list 12 things that rated themselves as significantly less helpful as the people who rated 3, because if I ask you for 3 examples of being helpful, you can probably come up with those fairly quickly. But if I ask you to give me 12, that starts to get difficult. You might get to 6 or 7 or 8, and then you're thinking, and then in your mind, you're going, man, I must not be very helpful, because if this researcher is asking for 12 examples, that must be common. People must be able to come up with 12 really quickly, and I can't. So I must not be very helpful at all. So that experience of not being able to come up with examples makes you feel less helpful because of that. And that starts shaping who you are. And I don't know about any follow-up studies with like those individuals. Like, did they talk? I'm sure they had a debrief afterwards and told them, but otherwise they might start thinking, yeah, I'm not a very helpful person.
Mm-hmm. And let's say no debrief, no follow up. That's what they're left with. That they're in their filter for this is, I'm not a very helpful person.
Yeah. And I know how research goes and what you have to do to get past IRB committees, the research boards at universities. You have to have debrief
Mm-hmm.
sessions. So
Yeah. So
I'm
people
sure they
don't
did
walk away from there because you unintentionally made them feel like they're
harm
not
them in some
helpful.
way. Right, right. So there would be a debrief, but I'm just saying, think of that experience of somebody else asking. Maybe somebody says, well, I'm a helpful person. Well, name a time. And maybe under stress, you can't even really think of a time. And then you're going, man, I must not be very helpful.
I'm not
So
helpful.
yeah, so that can start, and then the filters start to change a little bit, and every little thing, I mentioned butterfly effect earlier. It's almost like a butterfly effect. Every experience you have changes you a little bit, in a minute way.
Yeah. So the the idea of memory then, because I do feel like, and I don't know that it's not just me. I think we love stories. 'Cause I
Hmm.
love stories. I'm I guess self-proclaimed storyteller, but I I don't know where it comes from, but I like to tell stories. And so my question is there any research, or there any evidence or any feeling you have that the narrative, the story base, is better for learning, or does it matter?
Yes, it matters. It
Oh,
turns out it matters a lot, and there's so much research around this. So you were saying learning, right?
yeah.
Learning. So yeah, there's a lot of research says that we learn better through narratives, and narrative based learning helps us understand things better. So when people use analogies, we learn more than if they just give us a set of facts, straight facts. So if you have a list of facts you give to somebody, they're going to remember maybe a few of those.
Mm-hmm.
But if you use those facts in a story that you tell somebody, they're going to remember most of those. And it's just how we're built. We're creatures of narrative and of stories. And there's cultures that are more narrative based than other cultures. And this is around memory too. So memory and learning kind of go hand in hand a lot. But there's been quite a bit of research into how narrative affects our memory. So one line of work deals with childhood amnesia, and you've heard of that. You might not have heard it referred to that, but it's the fact that we can't remember things from when we were born. Like we have amnesia right after birth, and most people we say you can remember for things from around age 4. Have you heard that before?
I haven't. No.
Okay,
Uh,
so most of your memories. If I asked you what's your earliest memory, well, I'll do that. Do you know
don't do
what your
that.
earliest memory? Don't do that. Okay.
It'd be this
I
morning. I have the worst memory. The worst
but
memory.
if you think of your childhood, you remember your childhood, right? Can you remember an event that happened when you were really small, when you were really young?
Yeah, I'm taking a second to try to remember how far back. So I'm, 11, 9. Yeah, like 6 or 7. I can remember
Okay.
back to 6 or 7.
And if you had some time to think about it, you might be able to remember something earlier.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
So there's gender differences. Uh, Females report earlier memories than males, and then there's also cultural differences. And so what and I'm not up on this research a lot, but just following it kind of tangentially for other things, for like narrative and stuff. What research has found is that European descent, so people from Europe, uh, European descent Americans, Americans of European descent, and those in also Australia and New Zealand who are from uh, Europe, it's pretty stable that their first memories, and this is putting male and female together, but just so we're looking out culture, that it's around 4 years of age is about the earliest they can remember.
Hmm.
Um, Asian cultures, and there's a lot of differences in cultural differences in Asian communities as well, but a lot of the research has been around Japanese and Korean people. Their earliest memory on average is about 6 years of age. So that's a big difference from 6 to 4. But then the narrative based cultures, like the Maori people in New Zealand and the Aboriginal people in Australia, where narrative is, most of their history that they share with each other is oral history. Their earliest memory is usually around 2 years of age, sometimes 1 to 2. And
Oh,
there's probably some difference in uh, due to encoding differences in coding memories. So if you're around a family that and a group, a culture that has a lot of narrative involved, and there's a lot of details, and those that your brain's learning that details are really important, you're probably going to code information differently than if you're in a culture, a group of people that they just give just the facts, just a couple of the facts, and they don't care about details, and they leave out the details. Then your brain's going to learn to encode memories a little bit different. So that's probably part of it. But I think the bigger part of it is that it may not be that people are remembering or have those memories of the event as much as they've heard their family tell about things that happened to them when they were 2 and 3 years old. So now they've formed that memory from stories that are told rather than from the event is also a possibility.
mm.
So it's a cultural difference, probably not a brain difference, if that
So
makes sense.
you're saying though in that last example, they remember the story. Their memory is of it being told to them, not actually experiencing it.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so they researchers look at elaboration, and they'll like divide groups into low elaborative groups and high elaborative groups, and those that are highly elaborative tend to remember things from earlier in their life if their family's been that way. And usually it's the mother that leads that, is what most research shows.
Hmm.
So yeah, and memory, there's that part of it, like around how narrative affects memory in autobiographical memories, which is the childhood amnesia. An autobiographical memory is your own personal memory about your history.
Hmm.
But then other memories, like I said, if I give you a set of facts, you'll remember a few. But if I give you those facts in a story, you'll remember a lot.
Interesting. That's interesting.
And
So,
then okay, go ahead.
no. What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to add one other thing to learning about how narrative helps us learn. Since I already mentioned scripture earlier, I'll use that again. I'll just say that the what many people consider the most important book ever written is just a compilation of stories. And those stories are what many people from the Jewish and Christian faith look to for life guidance. And Jesus even taught his followers how to live and treat people through analogies, or what he called parables. So both tradition and science show how important narrative is to learning and memory.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, then I want to, because somewhere in what you're saying, it triggered a thought, but I was thinking about self-talk,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, because we all, I think, just have this like narrative or self-talk.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Our
I'm
inner
doing
voice.
that inner voice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That the the way that I talk to myself. Here's how I'll say it to you. I'll be a little revealing here. Is I find that most of my self talk is really negative. I work on it, but when I do something to myself, I'm like, God, that was dumb. Why did you do that? Or and instead of and I think I've gotten better learning about the brain, that I can rewire my brain, trying to give myself a little bit more grace on some things. Like, I'm sure a lot of people do that. That I wouldn't say that was dumb as much as I wasn't being mindful, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever the example is. But I do find that my back channel tends to just go really hard on me, really
Mm-hmm.
negative. Are we wired to, number one? I mean, I'm assuming we're wired for self talk,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
and
That's
but
narrative.
that's narrative.
Yep.
Are we wired for negative self talk, or do we do that to ourselves?
Well, I think both. I think we're wired for it, and we do it. Um, and it's our the master storyteller, excuse me, that I was mentioning, which is our conscious awareness. The
Mm-hmm.
inner voice is really, it evaluates things. One of its jobs is to evaluate things and to critique things. And then a lot of times that critique gets pointed inwards, and some people more than others. And then it becomes a kind of a loop, a habit, and it can become more and more negative and more harmful with time, depending on our reactions to it and things like that. So, but negative self-talk is something that's common, that we all do it. It's just, how much do we do it? So, you know, you don't want to do it too much. And I know, like, therapists and other people, they work to try to stop your negative self-talk, because it can be very damaging to you as a person. But you know how I am. I'm always trying to balance things and look for the balance, because I also want to add that some negative self-talk is healthy. So I'm not a therapist, but I do worry a little bit when people advocate for all positive self-talk and say, no, you should never have negative, you should always have good feelings and thoughts about yourself. I just believe there's some balance that's required of this, because you probably met a person that's always right. Like, this is the best it's ever been done. Everybody says that I'm the best, and nobody's done this any better than I have. And it's just a form of self-delusion, really, and it's very unhealthy. So you have to have some types of checks and balances. I mean, there's so many times I've wanted to remind people just to self-evaluate just a little bit. Like just a little bit of self-evaluation might help you out
Yeah.
versus everything is always good and positive. We have to be a well-rounded person and a resilient person. You need to be able to self-evaluate. You need to be able to stop the negative talk. From it's hard to pick yourself up and start again if you're very negative. So that fights resiliency, but you also have to have some balance in there.
Like a realistic view of yourself.
Yeah, and it's hard to determine what a realistic view is, but each
I like
person
balance.
has to
Maybe I'll
come
stick
to
with
that.
balance. There has to be a balance between, you're not the dumbest person who's ever lived, but also
Hmm.
you're fallible. I mean, you can make mistakes.
Yeah, I like to say that on any continuum you pick, you're not the last person on that continuum. Like you're not the furthest outlier. You're somewhere in the middle on that.
You're in the
So
middle.
you're not the if you look at smart to dumb, you're not the smartest and you're not the dumbest. You're somewhere in there. Since you
You're in
mentioned
the
that,
middle. Yeah.
yeah, somewhere you might lean towards one end or the other a little bit, but just be able to evaluate that and understand it. But then don't beat yourself up for it. Try to be better. Like try to think of positive ways to get around that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's been a lot of research in self-talk, positive and negative, in sports psychology and in therapy. But you can just imagine if you're going to, excuse me, if you're going to compete like in a tennis match or a golf match or swim meet or
Hmm.
something where it's more like individual type thing. If you're competing against somebody that's really good and you think to yourself, like right before you dive into the water or right before you lob the tennis ball up to hit it, if you think, oh boy, this person I'm competing against is ranked way higher than I am, I don't think I stand a chance today, then you probably don't have a chance.
Hmm.
You have
Yeah,
to
you're
have
probably right.
you're probably right. And so there's been a lot of research to show that if you have positive self-talk, that your performance is a lot better than if you have negative self-talk. That hinders your performance. Or
Mm.
if you're on a basketball team and you have the ball and your coach calls timeout with like 3 seconds left and you're down by one, and the coach draws up a play where you're going to come off a screen and catch the ball and shoot it. If you go out and kind of line up on the court to get ready to run the play, and while you're getting ready and thinking where the pick's going to be, if you're thinking to yourself, okay, whatever I do, I can't miss this shot. I mean, my life will be over. Everybody will
Yeah.
hate me. If those are your thoughts, then $100 says you're going to miss
You're
that
going to
shot
miss that
every
shot.
time. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You ain't
So
going to make that shot.
so you have to have, there's self-talk can set you up for success and failure. So I know there's that. So it's always good in business and at your job to use positive self-talk to help you perform at your best. But then when you're evaluating yourself, you need to be careful with that. So I think this happens too when you're recalling an event. Like if you and a coworker had a dispute, and let's say it lasted 30 seconds. They went, wah, wah, and you went wah, 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 and they went wah, wah, and you went wah. And then you walk
Hmm.
off. For the next 30 days, you're probably going to be rehashing that in your mind and thinking, oh, I should have said this instead. Or you think of something really clever. If I would have said want, want, they would have just gone,
God, I do
dropped
that
their
all
head
the
and walked
time.
off. And
Yeah.
so it's okay to evaluate a conversation once or twice because you can learn from those and be better, or even 3 times. But after you've gone over it about 3 times, you've probably pulled the most important salient points out of it. And then from then on, it just starts to get into really defeative self-talk. And so defeatist self-talk. So you need to stop that and make yourself stop it. And don't
Mm.
rehearse it over and over and over and over, because that can be harmful.
How many times I've come up with the ultimate comeback the next day. Next day, I'm like, I had it. I would have just crushed that argument. But yeah, it was a day
If
later.
arguments were like chess, where you could say something, hit the button, and then the other person could just think for a while and think of different possibilities, and then finally say theirs, hit the button, and then you think for a while.
Yeah, but if we did it that way, there wouldn't be any arguments.
That's true.
Because most of the arguments are your back channel, just,
Just passion, just
just, yeah.
emotions. Yelling
And
it
so
out.
if I got my on channel a little more involved, we go, what are we arguing? Why are we having this argument? This is not productive at all. You're about to say something really mean. Don't say that.
And you
Um,
might even think right before you hit, yeah, you know what, you're right. Then you hit the button, it's their turn. They'll say, well, actually, I see some good in your point too.
yep.
So it might even
That,
turn that way.
there you go. There you go. And what about, so self-talk, and I want to go back to narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking about just, I don't know what to call it. I'll call it a gut reaction to something, right? Because we
Mm-hmm.
were talking
Mm-hmm.
about you're taking in information from the world, and whatever that information is, the assembly line, all of that makes sense to me. But then, what when when I see somebody that I don't know, when I meet somebody new, let's say, and I have this, because I think you and I talked about this in a previous episode. You just the feeling,
Mm-hmm.
like, um, but how does that tie into the narrative then?
Yeah, so that's also your narrative and your self-talk. When you meet somebody, for the first time, you're trying to your brain is trying to figure them out as quickly as possible so that you have a better understanding of who they are and like how you should interact with them. So it's looking for patterns and schemas and things like that. And those kind of feelings that start to come forward, your self-talk will be talking about it, like, wow, this person looks this way or that way. And you're thinking that in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this really bad habit that I've tried to break, but it's when I'm first being introduced to somebody, I forget to listen to the introduction and I'm listening to my inner voice instead. And so they'll say, hey, John, I want you to meet this person. This is John. He does. And then at that point, I block out what they're saying because I'm trying to figure out that person. And then they'll say, and this is, well, it's like Charlie Brown's teacher,
Wah, wah,
whatever.
wah,
And
wah,
then the
wah.
person reaches forward and says, hey, John, sticks out their hand. And I say, hey, and I miss their name completely. I go, hey, you, how are you doing? It's so awkward. I'm so mad at myself because it's literally 2 seconds later. Like if I could have just listened for 2 seconds, I would know that they said, this is Tim Johnson. And when they said, hi, John, I could say, hi, Tim. But I'm going, oh, and there's like panic that sets in. So one time I even thought, I'm going to start punishing myself so that I'll learn. And I'll just say, you know what? I'm an idiot and was not listening when they told me your name. What is your name again? And I tried that. That was really awkward and awful. I'm not going to do that again. But it's, you need to listen to what people are saying, listen to names, especially because a person's name is the most important word in the English language to them. So you should know that and use it when you talk to them because it makes them feel better. But I miss the name and I know not to do it and I can't stop myself. I'm getting a little bit better at it. But a funny story, my grandpa owned a printing company and he had, I don't know, 100 and some employees working under him. And one day his son said, hey, Dad, I want you to meet it was like Tom Smith or something like that. I want you to meet Tom Smith. And the same thing happened to my grandpa, and he lost his name. And he said, hello, Mr. Witt. And he said, hi. He said, how do you spell your name again? And he's like, Tom. Oh, yeah. He thought he was going to be clever, like to say, I didn't quite get your name. How do you spell it? And it was something really
It's
simple.
Tom.
Yeah,
Yeah, three
Tom.
letters.
So I'm not going to try that. But yeah, it's if when you meet somebody, that inner voice starts talking. Sometimes it's louder than the person introducing you, and so you
Mhm.
miss names and things. But it's what our brain does again to try to sort and categorize so that you have a better idea of how to interact with that person and not sort and categorize. I'm not saying necessarily in the negative way of stereotyping because you don't know them yet. It's your way of trying to understand the person in that moment. And then once you get introduced and you start to know them, then you see them as an individual and that type of thing. But it's those initial thoughts.
Yeah. So, how interesting would the world be if we? So, I'll go back before I launch into that. I was thinking about in police work. there's a program when you graduate the academy, it's post academy training. We had, when I went through, it was called field training. There's other versions of it, but a big part of field training is something called they called it the narrative drive. But what it really, I think, I've heard it referred to as like a think aloud or a talk aloud. Um, and so I'm imagining, I'm bringing someone to you. I say, hey, John, this is blah, blah, blah. And you do a narrative drive where you just go, I'm sorry, as that person was talking, my brain was filtering information and I didn't hear all, like, if we just explained everything going on in our brain, we wouldn't get very much accomplished, but it would be fascinating to hear, what is going on inside your brain. So in police work, it was a way for a training officer or a senior officer to kind of understand what you're looking for, what that means to you. And I used it in training officers later on too, just to go, tell me what you're looking at, tell me what you're thinking. And it was really enlightening in that way. But this idea of getting people to tell another person what their narrative, that running narrative is, I just think that would be really interesting.
That would be, yeah. But especially even people, like they walk in and like you're in your mind, you're thinking, what did they look in the mirror today? What are they thinking putting on that outfit or whatever, or thinking, oh no, not this person. Their personality is like fingernails on a chalkboard. Those thoughts come in your mind when you see people with that. And it's really your brain, again, your back channel. They match the pattern because you've had experiences with them. Like once they start talking, I can't get away from them. I got to avoid them now. So you have those thoughts that come up or whatever it is that just kind of push you to all these thoughts bubbling up as somebody's walking towards you. And then you say, hi. So I hope that I don't have to share that narrative always.
No, I didn't mean that one.
Okay.
Not that one. Yeah. So since I brought it up, it seems like for law enforcement or maybe some other areas that understanding the narrative, understanding this process or these processes, there might be some training value to this. And so can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that's one of the things that's really good is that that narrative can, I mentioned it can shape our experiences, but it can also, you can use narrative to change how you do things. And that's one of the basis of the training that we developed called Preflex is about a narrative. And it's to take a handful of concepts that are important. And for our training, there's different ones for law enforcement and for industrial, but for industrial safety. But it's breathe, scan, threat or hazard, whichever word you want to use there.
Well,
position.
Let's go with industrial for just a second, just to keep it simple. So
breathe. Okay, so breathe, scan, hazard, position, protect, engage, and escape.
Okay.
So those are the 7 concepts we want people to learn, and then we want to build schemas around those concepts so that as information comes in, it helps their back channel guide their thoughts and behaviors to be safer to begin with. So they don't have to think, where am I standing in relation to this stack of steel? Because if it topples, I'm in its way. I need to position myself far enough away that it won't fall on me. Your back channel, if it learns about hazards and positioning and protecting and escaping, then it will just start automatically without it having to come to conscious awareness. It will see the pattern of this could fall on me. So people actually stand further away from a stacked steel than they do before the training. And it's not, they don't even sometimes know until you ask them. They go, oh yeah, I'm standing over here because of, they can kind of explain it, but it helps. Those concepts help keep you safer to start with. So to build them, you can't just say, here's the 7 concepts. You got it? Yeah. Okay. Now you're going to be safer. You have to build the schemas around those concepts. So self-talk, self-narrative is a way to tell your back channel. It's a way for your on channel to communicate with your back channel that these are the things we want you to learn. These are the schemas we want you to build. And so to do that, to use narrative, we already have self-talk. We've been talking about that. We're wired to do that. We can just say, use self-talk because you already know how to do that, but self-talk around these 7 concepts. So put these 7 concepts into your self-talk. So now,
Okay.
as you're talking to yourself about something, you're going, okay, I'm going to walk over here, but I need to be careful because that steel where it's stacked, that could be a hazard, because if it tipped and fell, then it would, could reach out to this area. I need to be sure that I position myself in a way that it won't, if it does fall, it won't hit me. So I'll walk this route. If, something does happen, I can escape this way. And they just start talking in those terms as they do their jobs. Or as I'm getting ready to weld here, I've got to, think about these certain things, the position of my tools, the position of myself, are other people in the area? How do I protect me? How do I protect others? And, just everything you're doing, talk yourself through it, but using those 7 concepts.
Mm. Yeah, because I was just thinking about, especially when you're under stress, like I'm going to do a presentation up in front of a room and the computer's not working and I try to fix it and I'll find I start talking to myself. It's out loud. It's not inner dialogue. It's me going, okay, I got to plug this in here. I got to do this. And I'm in front of everybody and I'm not even thinking about them. I'm just talking my way through this. So what you're describing is using that very same thing that we do anyway, and just attaching certain words to it, these concepts to it.
Yep.
And through that, you can actually not only change behavior, but I'm going to be doing, if I've done this enough and I've narrated these things using these concepts, I just do them. I don't have to think about them.
Yeah, that's the behavioral change.
Yeah.
Because if you have to think about it, then you're relying on your on channel to behave in a certain way, and that works the 1 or 2 or 3 times you think about it, but then you're just back into your old habits.
Right. You go on autopilot. Or if we go back to law enforcement, tying in what we've talked about previously is if it's just your on channel, then if there's enough stress in the environment, your on channel is not available in that moment. So whatever you've built through these training,
patterns and habits,
right? Patterns. You've done enough of this, enough repetitions, created a pattern. It's in the back channel, and in those circumstances, then the on channel is not available. It's not okay. But the behavior is going to be what we want it to be.
It'll be more appropriate than
appropriate.
Yes.
Well played.
And it's so that's safety side, but you can do it for more than safety. So like you helped with this experiment in the state of Washington where we used there was the concepts built into short micro training lessons, videos that students at the academy watched, and it had the code words, but it also had themes around tolerance and empathy and emotional intelligence and self-control in each of these lessons. And what we were trying to do was to change biased behavior, make behaviors less biased.
Right.
And there's in law enforcement, for the listeners, because I know you know this, but there's a big push for implicit bias training for police officers, and so police officers would treat everybody fairly. And a lot of community groups get behind this, which is good. But I think a lot of them believe that if police officers sit through a 2-day implicit bias training course, that they're going to be less biased. And unfortunately, the research shows that is not the case, that there's no real change to behavior after implicit bias training. There can be changes in knowledge. There almost always is. You learn more about your implicit biases, which is good. That's a really good thing. There's a lot of times, I don't know if I can say most of the time because it depends on the training, but good trainings will also create a change in attitude towards minorities and things like that. So that's good, but behaviors don't change.
Right.
Because after you sit through 2 days of training and your attitude has changed and your knowledge has changed, but then, a week later you're on the job and you get a call. I don't know why I'm giving these examples. You're a police officer, you give a better example.
That's
I'm
okay.
just thinking like to a convenience store. And,
Mhm.
the convenience store says there's teenagers outside that are causing trouble. I want them removed. So you might even on the drive over be thinking, I want to use what I learned about my biases so I'm not biased against these teenagers. And when you pull up and open the door to get out, the convenience store manager or whatever is outside starting to yell at them and they're yelling back and things are starting to deteriorate very quickly. At that point, you just fall back on how you always have done things. And you're not thinking about biased behaviors. You're trying to solve the issue.
Right.
And so we were, the state of Washington asked us if we could use our training. They were already using Preflex for safety. They were saying, can you use it to help with implicit bias training? So we created these trainings and had the students go through about an hour of training over 13 weeks. So it's just a few minutes each week. And then we waited 5 weeks and tested their behavior to see if it had changed. And we found significant changes in empathy and tolerance in how they treated people. For example, the scenario that they went through, the control group who didn't have this training, the Preflex implicit bias training, 8% of them offered to help a person, and those with Preflex, it was like 65 or 66% offered to help a person. So it was like the increase of 8 times. They're 8 times more likely to help. So it's those types of ways that you can think about narrative, self-narrative, and thinking about concepts and talking about concepts will change your behavior over time. As we're talking about and thinking about narrative and how it can influence empathy, my son, Orrin, Orrin.
Mhm.
Orrin is studying at the St. Andrews University over in Scotland, University of St. Andrews in Scotland. And narrative is a huge part of his, I shouldn't say huge, narrative is an integral part of his dissertation that he's writing for his PhD. And so I just contacted him and he started talking about narrative and some philosophical points, and then Kierkegaard and about the self relating itself to itself. And I was going, my eyes were kind of glazing over. And I was saying, let's keep it a little bit more surfacey. But he came up with what I thought was a really interesting viewpoint from the philosopher Nussbaum around narrative. She
Mhm.
argues that narrative imagination is what allows us to have empathy. So, in other words, to be empathetic, we have to create this internal narrative that's reading from another person's storyline, because we all each have our individual storylines. So it's reading from their storyline and their perspective to try to then interpret that into as part of our narrative. So we have to tell ourselves the story of what it would be like to be in their shoes and experience what they're experiencing, because you can't just see somebody and know what that's like.
Mhm.
And so there has to be this imaginative narrative that we have in order to do that, which I thought was a really a even different way to look at narrative, maybe even an extension of narrative as I was thinking about it. I was thinking of narrative as just our self-talk, but the imaginative narrative or narrative imagination is using our self-talk to understand what another person might be going through for empathy. And I'm sure I probably butchered that, so I apologize to Orrin and to Martha Nussbaum. But that's my best understanding of it, which makes a lot of sense in narrative and how we can use it to be empathetic to others.
Yeah, so to for help me make sense of what you're saying, because I think I have it, but we've talked about narrative, me being the star of my own movie
Mhm.
here. But then what you're referencing is part of empathy is I have to be able to imagine myself in the shoes of somebody else.
Yeah, and
Is
you
that
can't do that unless you have a narrative around that, what
narrative?
that would look
Right.
like and feel like. Mhm.
Yeah.
So you tell yourself that story, based on trying to read their storyline that
Mm-hmm.
they're putting together with their experiences, that they're building their storyline.
And so going all the way back to the beginning to Will and Harper. So having empathy for someone, right? You see where I'm going with this, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Is there's a trans person. We keep saying trans person, but I feel like there's even more. There's people who are that are beyond even that description. This group of people, the more people that realize this is not who I'm supposed to be, and have the courage to break out and make changes. I'm including all of those people that have taken steps. And so I was saying, go and get to know someone from that community. But there's you just added something for me. For me personally, is the need for the ability for the narrative imagination, for just as simply as for me to be able to try to put myself into the shoes of another person who's going through this, and how much. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say that I want to add that because I gave guidelines, and I said, watch it with the intention of understanding how their brain works, like picking out conversations and things. But
Right.
You're right. I would like to add to that, and also watch it with your narrative imagination to try to read Harper's storyline. Harper has a storyline.
Yes.
Try to read that storyline and understand that using your narrative and the storyline of others. That's a great point to add that to the kind of assignment I gave.
Yeah.
I want to add that. I'm glad you came up with that. That's good.
Wow. Yeah. So, okay. That took us a little bit long in the episode, but I still think very much worth it. So thank you for all of that, John.
Yeah. And thank you, Mr. Slaughter, for the question. That was a great question. It was really detailed, had a lot of parts to it that I liked. I hope we covered them all.
Me too. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.